But speaking of which, rethinking kind of, I guess, what our government is and who we are relative to our government. What power do we have? What we deserve as a population. We were asking the question, well, we were debating. I'll give you a little bit of peek behind the curtain here. Q and I were debating in our pre-production meeting whether or not to include an article that basically it just gets into the weeds about, Medicare and Medicaid and people losing access and all that sort of stuff, right? It wasn't too dense, but radio, we got to kind of share a little bit of facts and then really more opinions. It's just kind of the way this beast works. Okay. So because we wanted to arrive at a certain point and have a conversation, and the articles would have been the starting point, we were like, hey, let's not go through the weeds. Let's just start where we want to start. And so that's why this segment sounds a little different. Why doesn't the fire department cost you money? Okay. Now, eagle-eyed viewers will remember a conversation that I had recently with Bobby Nichols, who is a Democratic Socialist candidate for city council. And he came up recently on the show and discussed, the enthusiasm found in the Democratic Socialist movement here in the United States. And he said something. He told a story which I didn't verify, but he seems like he's a competent individual. And even if this story is completely made up, I think it gives some insight into how we can start to rethink about things. He said that I believe he said Rome, ancient Rome, there was no fire department per se. The fire department was owned by an individual. It was privatized, right? For the people just coming to the conversation, capitalism is where the means of production are owned by individuals, and socialism is where the means of production for a society are owned by the people, right? And so the nature of business, rather than to benefit the individual, is to benefit the people, right? It's just two different ways of thinking. Of course, there's a lot more complicated explanations for them, but that's a quick and dirty version. It helps us to say this next piece. So the fire department in ancient Rome being owned by an individual, what would happen is this individual would see a house on fire, or people would tell him, then he'd get his wagon, water and whatever, run up to the house and say, hey, I could put your house on fire. I could put the fire out if you sell the house to me. You got about 10 more minutes and then your house is worth zero. Right now, I'll give you at least something for it. And then I'll put the fire out. We'll make it nice again. And you can rent from me for the rest of your life, and that way you don't end up with zero. Right. And this was like taking advantage of people because it was privatized. Right. And so it would be unconscionable for us to think of the fire department in that way now. Imagine if you had a house fire. You imagine your house catching on fire. It's Christmas. You have a tree up. It catches on fire. I know that's a very 80s PSA sort of scenario, but stranger things have happened. And then the fire department rolls up to your house and it's like, all right, well, I tell you what, we'll give you 30 grand for your house. It's all it's worth now, or 100 grand, whatever. I don't know where you live, but whatever. Just some lowball offer. And then at least you'll have something. Otherwise, it's just going to burn and you'll have nothing, and then you can use that and rent back from us. You would feel taken advantage of, right? That'd be something that'd be impossible to think about. Well, I want you to hold that example in your brain, and I want to shift gears and talk about other public services. All right. So let me answer this question first. Fire departments generally don't charge you directly because they're funded by local taxes, property and sales, part of the city's general budget, and treated as an essential public service like police, similar to an insurance policy for the whole community. Though fees can apply for false alarms or non-emergency services, and sometimes out-of-area responses or private EMS bills are separate. But for the most part, fire departments are free. Well, we were using that article in our pre-production meeting to talk about Medicaid and how we are the only country, I think the number one cause of bankruptcy in this country is medical debt, right? We have to pay for the hospital. We don't have to pay for the police. We don't have to pay for the fire department. We don't have to pay to go to the park. We don't have to pay. And to think about that, imagine if you had to pay to go to the library to research something. You'd be like, you would push back against that, like, oh my God, why? But so many of us push back against healthcare, the idea of government supported healthcare. So many of us push back against it, and we are sold fear of what could potentially go wrong. And yet, and still, we don't see those things going wrong anywhere else. And by that same logic, I would argue that those of us that see something wrong with the way that policing is done in this country, those of us that usually they look like me and look like Q, we're black men for those that can't see us. For those of us that are critical of the way the policing is done, no one ever comes to the table and says we should privatize the police departments and you should pay per police call. No one ever says that, but they have all of this stuff to say about a private healthcare system, and not wanting a public healthcare system. And it's the most backwards, asinine thing. We are getting taken advantage of day in and day out. And we've been taught that that system would fail us. We've been taught to fear something that seems to be working around the world just fine. And we are fighting each other as a result of that. Q, the rest of the time is yours.
Fear is a masterful manipulation tool. The same fear that would never allow people to suggest privatizing police, right? Because they're afraid that they wouldn't show up.
You're right. Yes, go ahead.
It's flipped on its head to say, hey, other people that need health care would get it off of your money, and you don't want that. It's just they just re-manipulate you with the same logic. It would save you money, even if the idea was I'm paying for healthcare for my neighbors. It would still be cheaper. So none of even what stops you from doing it is real. I think to the tune of like almost $500 billion, it would save the country.
Yeah.
If we did universal healthcare. 500 billion.
Half a trillion.
We won't do it because we've been tricked into it. Before we move on, I just wanted to give you some backing because you presented this as something that you were uncertain of.
Okay.
Yes, in Rome, the first fire brigade was a wealthy man named Marcus Crassus. And exactly as you described, if the owner refused to pay him, he would let their houses burn, offering to buy it while it's on fire and negotiating in a predatory way, exactly like you described. Very important to point out, though, because that's the first instance of private fire brigade and firefighters in the way that we think of them. But guess who had a different idea?
Who?
The ancient Egyptians.
I knew you were going to say that.
Who worked on preventative measures, like the things that we suggest regarding crime.
Okay.
There's ways to put things in place to help prevent problems that haven't happened yet. And of course, ancient Africans had that idea with regard to fires, preventing them and then fighting them because they saw them as a problem for everyone if they happened. Yeah. Isn't that crazy how throughout history, I won't even say what I'm going to say beyond that. Just a very, very interesting look into the differences in the starting of firefighting.